Well, thank you for that introduction. Hello and welcome to today's session. On behalf of the professional development team here at Oxford University Press, I would also like to welcome you all to the first ever Teachers E-Symposium. So today's session, as you all know, is building a reading foundation through synthetic phonics. And we are hoping that by the end of the session, we will all have a better understanding of early literacy instruction. We will also have a better idea of how to blend to read words, so going from print to sound. And we'll be looking at how to use decodable and level readers in the classroom. So let's start by looking at the English orthographic system. So the English orthographic system, or the sound system, the writing system, is incredibly complicated in that it has 26 letters of the alphabet, but 44 sounds and just 26 letters to represent those sounds. So some sounds are then consequently represented by 2 letters. And so these are called digraphs. And then there are some more that are represented by 3 letters, and these are called trigraphs. To add to that, another level of complexity is that there are more than 250 different ways of spelling or writing these 44 sounds. And these spelling variations are, of course, called graphemes. So there are more than 250 graphemes in the English language. Other complexities include that one sound can be represented by 1, 2, or 3 letters or 4 letters in some cases. Then there are some sounds which are represented by multiple spelling alternatives, which we just discussed, the graphemes. And one grapheme or letter group can be represented by multiple sounds. So the O sound can be represented in all these different ways. So what does that mean for reading instruction? That makes reading instruction in English particularly challenging. So there's a new system to introduce to make reading instruction easy and accessible for all. It's called the Systematic Synthetic Phonics Instruction. And so it has 3 main components. So it's systematic, that means the order of teaching phoneme and grapheme correspondence. There's a particular order to teach the phoneme and grapheme correspondence. So we do not generally follow the alphabetic order ABCD to teach the sounds. It is systematic, so it is synthetic, so there's synthesis or blending of individual sounds. So you teach pure sounds and then you teach students how to blend those sounds from left to right in a word. And then, of course, the phonics bit is having students understand the relationship between sounds and letters so that they can accurately decode rather than just guess the words. So accuracy is very important. So if we look at systematic synthetic phonics as an instructional program, there are 3 core skills that we want to teach children. The first is blending, where we go from print to sound. The second skill that we want to teach them is segmenting, which is the reverse, actually. So you're going from sound to print. And this is an essential skill that students will need to be able to spell words. And then there's, of course, handwriting. So all of these 3 go hand in hand. So let's look at blending and segmenting. Blending is synthesizing sounds. So you have individual sounds and you push them together or blend them or synthesize them to be able to read words. And segmenting is the opposite. So we stretch a sound and we try and identify individual sounds within the word. So for instance, let's look at this example. If we were to read the word spoon, then we will have to identify individual sounds and push them together. So sp, oo, spoon, spoon. So when I push those sounds together, I can read the word spoon. And if I am teaching segmenting, then I would stretch the word. So it starts with hearing the word spoon, spoon. So when I stretch the sounds, stretch the word, you can hear the sounds oo, And so that's segmenting. So these skills are reversible. and they need to be taught together. So what are the teaching principles for systematic synthetic phonics? So you've got to systematically teach the knowledge of letter sound correspondences. Application of the newly acquired skills is really important. So once students know some basic sounds, they should immediately be applying their knowledge to decode words and segment words. So so it's very important to use decodable words, sentences, and text for individual reading, spelling, and writing practices. And one golden principle of systematic synthetic phonics is that you don't teach or promote multi-cueing reading strategies. So what are multi-cueing reading strategies? Multi-cueing reading system, or the multi-cueing reading model, is where we would encourage students to guess the word to guess unfamiliar words based on context, or based on if they can read the sentence and try to figure out which word fits in. So there's a lot of guessing, and so looking at pictures to guess the word. There's a lot of guessing involved. Systematic synthetic phonics instruction focuses on accuracy. So you are looking at decoding and not just figuring out, or not just guessing what the word is. So what does phonics instruction look like in the classroom? We start off with teaching the sounds and then immediately move on to practice blending and segmenting during daily phonics lessons. Application of phonic knowledge as the first approach to reading and spelling. So whenever they come across a word that they're not familiar with, they're trained to immediately look at the letter sound correspondences, identify them, and then use their skills in blending and segmenting to read that word, blending particularly in reading. And then they should be practicing irregular and high frequency words. That's another very important thing that students need to do, because there are some words in English that are irregular or have letter sound correspondences that the students have not learned yet. Students also need to practice independent reading through decodable texts. And this also they need to do fairly early on, so that they can actually use their skills to read real books. So this is what the reading journey looks like. So you teach the sounds. So teach phonics is the first stage. The second is practice phonics. So this is a mix of reading decodable words and decodable texts. So, actual books that have all decodable words and sentences. And then you move on to richer reading, which is where we sort of delve more into comprehension. So systematic synthetic phonics instruction is based on the simple view of reading, where you teach two core skills of reading, decoding, and comprehension. So practicing phonics lays more focus on decoding. And when students can decode, they can then look at the pictures and talk about comprehension. And then they transition into richer reading, where there's much more emphasis on comprehension. So the first thing that we need to teach students in synthetic phonics is to teach the sounds, and pure sounds is what we are looking at. So sounds without adding a up sound at the end. So let's watch this video and see how pure sounds can be taught. So as you can see, the sound of the letter S is S and not S. So no sound being added towards the end. These two sounds are aspirated, so you have the T and P sound, and they need to be taught as such. Just go to the previous slide.
D, G, O.
So graphemes of the K sound.
E, R, O, J, W, X, Y, Z,
There are 26 letters in the alphabet, but 44 sounds in the English language. This means that some sounds are made using pairs of letters. These letter pairs are called digraphs. When 3 letters are used to make a single sound, it is known as a trigraph.
Sh. Sh. Mm.
So these two variations need to be taught. The first is unvoiced, and the second is there's a slight vibration.
Mm.
And this is the sound. So there's no G at the end. It's a nasal sound.
A. E.
The long E sound.
I.
So this is the trigraph.
O. Ow. Oi. Ear. U. A.
So all of these sounds need to be taught explicitly through the direct teaching method. So you first teach the sounds, then have students and model how to say these sounds and model how to blend these sounds. So this is how this letters and sounds are taught. There's a document issued by the Department of Education and Skills in the UK, which lays out the pattern of sounds and how they need to be taught over the course of 2 years. So there are phase 2 sounds that students will start off with in kindergarten, essentially, or towards the end of nursery. And then students move on to phase 3 sounds. There are some consonant digraphs and then vowel digraphs and trigraphs that need to be covered throughout phase 3. And then when students move on to phase 4, this is essentially in grade 1, and you can see that students are now moving on to alternate spellings. So they already know the A sound, and now they're learning that the A sound can also be represented by AY. Or the E sound, as you can see over here, if you follow the pointer. So you also introduce split graphemes. That means that there will be another letter between these, but they essentially represent one sound, such as meat. No, it's not a split grapheme in meat, but yeah. So there's usually another letter between these. And so once students have learned all of these, and as they're learning all of these sounds, they also start practicing blending to read, which is synthesizing sounds to read words. And the core skills that we're trying to develop is decoding. Decoding refers to the process of figuring out the words. So what you're essentially doing is you are using your knowledge of the relationship between letters and sounds to be able to read the written word. Once the skill is developed, this knowledge allows children to recognize familiar words and quickly pronounce words that they have not even seen before, right? So essentially familiar words, quickly reading familiar words, and then using that knowledge to also read unfamiliar words, of words that they haven't been explicitly taught yet. So decoding has some important subskills that we need to teach. So the first subskill is to glance at the printed word from left to right and recognize letter groups. You then use or train the students to use their index finger to point directly under each grapheme or the written letter while saying the sound from left to right. So letter or group of letters. They have to say the whole word while running their index finger from left to right beneath the printed word. Okay, so we're going to exactly see what this looks like. And then if need be, then they need to modify the pronunciation to match the blended sounds to the real world's pronunciation where necessary. So in order to make sure students are independently practicing blending and segmenting and to monitor it effectively, we need to teach them some phonics routines. So there's a routine for blending sounds, a routine for segmenting, and then a routine for handwriting. So the routine for blending we'll be focusing on in today's session is where you use your index finger to point under each sound, letter sound correspondence, and then slide it under the word from left to right to be able to blend those sounds. For segmenting, students identify the sound. So you stick out your thumb to identify the first, second, and third sound, identify how many sounds there are. And then once you figured out many sounds, you put those sounds in writing by using the letters that are that represent that sound. And then for handwriting, of course, you've got to develop the tripod grip. So let's practice the routine for blending. So you glance at the word left from right, identify the sounds. You put your index finger under each sound and say it. So p, e, n. And then you start off from the first sound and glide your finger through p, e, n, pin. And I slightly modified it just to swiftly pronounce the word. And this is the skill that we need to teach students explicitly, and they need to practice it in order for them to be able to read independently. So let's practice some blending. So the first word, how many sounds are there in the first word? If you can identify the sounds, and please type in your responses. All right, type in your responses in the chat window. I see some of you already are. Okay, so a lot of threes. Yes, so there are 3 sounds in the word. Let's practice reading and identifying these sounds. So the first sound is, so not f, ox, ox, fox. Let's read another one. Yes. 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 Can you guess how many words? Can you identify, sorry, how many sounds are there in this word? Okay. Yes, great. 3 sounds. W, e, b, w, e, b, web. So for this one, please put your finger under the sounds and identify the sounds. So identify how many sounds. Okay. All right, some people are saying 5. Okay. Some are saying 4. So remember to identify the sound and not the number of letters. Okay, excellent. So somebody said 3. Yes, there are 3 sounds in this word. Now I want you to practice reading with me. I want you to put your finger, index finger, under the first 2 letters, qu, Q-U, that's the qu sound. 1 sound, 2 letters, 1 sound. E, k, C and K. Remember, we saw it in the video as well. C and K are graphemes for the k sound. So qu, e, k. Let's put our finger under the first letter and then glide over the sounds. Quick, quick, quick is the word. Great, now let's try this. Again, 2 letters, z sound. So double letters representing the same sound again. So e, z. Let's put our index fingers under the sounds. E, z, fizz, quiz. All right, this one now. Ch, e, k, ch, e, k, ch, ik, chick. Great, so are we feeling a little more confident now? Let's try and read a sentence now. E, he, is, qu, ik, quick. He is quick. So again, using the same protocol, whenever we are decoding, we're going to use the same protocol. So even if students are reading sentences, They're going to follow the same protocol. And even when you are marking them, even when you're assessing them for their skills, you will have them identify every individual sound, right? So if students can identify individual sounds and blend them together, you give them a mark for that, for reading that word correctly. Even if students are reading the word correctly, but they cannot identify the sounds, you will not give them credit for reading that word, because that shows they're not decoding that word properly. So you can practice blending. There are a lot of resources available online. There's this really good resource from Oxford University Press that I really highly recommend for learning to blend and teaching students how to blend. These are the little blending books. I'm just going to show you how these books work. So they're available on subscription. They're available on Oxford OWL online. So so, group of letters, for a group of letters, you've got books, you practice individual sounds given over here. And there's also practice for reading sight words or tricky words. And then you will see these words like this on each page. So there's a whole word for the students to practice individually. So they'll identify how many sounds are there in this word. And once they've done that, on the next page, they then have sounds identified for them. So these dashes show two letters representing one sound, and then dots represent one letter representing one sound. And so they can check the letter sound correspondence, and then they can play the sound button and see if they've got the sounds correct. So the sound button identifies sounds and then blends them quickly. So there's a lot of words to practice with. And then students move on to reading sentences. So this can be done in class with printed books, and this can be done, you can assign these books to students so that they can build their skills. And this is really an excellent resource to use nowadays when students are not coming to classes. So if you've got students who need practice with blending, you can then recommend these books. But if you don't have subscription for these, that's perfectly fine. There are lots of videos available online and flashcards to help you do this. So once students have mastered blending individual words, then they move on to decodable texts. So let's see what decodable texts are and why we use.
You get good at what you practice. We're teaching children the letters and how to blend them together. Decodable texts match that. So decodable texts are generally written using the letter sound knowledge that the children have been taught. There will inevitably be sight words and perhaps a couple of content words, but the large percentage of that text is material that they should be able to read on their own. That is what will help them practice. You're giving them opportunities to practice what you've been trying to teach them. Of course, they should be being read, the children should be hearing lots of other stories so that they're building their vocabulary, their world knowledge, and more sophisticated language structures, because literate language books always have more sophisticated language than oral language. Of course, that should be happening, but for their own little bit of practice, they should start with decodable texts. That is clearly where the evidence goes, and it's logical, isn't it? You get good at what.
Yeah, so that's the whole logic behind decodable texts. You will keep getting, so students will keep getting better with targeted practice. And that's essentially what decodable texts are looking to develop. So when do you use decodable text? After explicitly teaching the letter sound correspondences. When to start? Students should know at least 3 to 4 sets of letters. So that means they should know about 12 sounds to begin with, 12 to 16 sounds. Students should be familiar with blending routines, so they should be following those blending routines to sort of and moving towards independently practicing blending as well. Students should be familiar with some tricky words as well. Tricky words are generally given in books as well, such as this one. This is a Decodable Reader by Oxford, in the Oxford Reading Tree series. It's the Biff, Chip and Kipper Stories series. And you can see the title is decodable, and you can start talking about what's happening in the picture to engage students. You've got say the sound as you move on and start the book. You've got guidance on say the sound. So, the sounds are listed. You practice them with the students. The tricky words are also given. So you practice them before you move on and start reading, and then sounding out the words. So these are decodable words that you need to practice with the students before they start reading. So it, in, it, on, mum. So you practice reading these decodable words, and then you start. Some of the students will be reading at individual level. Some might need a little bit of help in decoding. But all of these words are decodable. There's one content word, which is kipper, which is the name of the character. So you're going to teach that, pre-teach that. And then the rest of the words are decodable. So ip, tip, it, in. And then once they have read the word, once they've read the sentences, they can then discuss and talk about what's happening in the story. So comprehension bit comes next in Decodable Readers. And so likewise, maybe they can do some guided reading in the beginning, and then they can be reading independently. What you've got to really see is if they're following the decoding routine that you've taught them, using their index finger and then gliding it over words as they read. So here are some top tips, do's and don'ts that you need to follow when you're teaching students how to decode words. Teach students to try to sound out words from left to right. If they are stuck, they should really be asking you for help. And you can go on and identify which sounds they are stuck at. If they cannot, then you provide that sound, but not the whole word. For decodable words, help students to sound them out wherever they're stuck. But for irregular words, ask them to identify any known letter sound correspondence in that word, right? So for instance, if no is a tricky word, they might not know the O, long O's, oo sound for the letter O, but they can identify n sound. So they identify that, and then you help them read the tricky word. What are the don'ts? They should never look at the pictures to guess words. Students should not look at the first letter and try and guess the word. A lot of students will try and do this. So you stop them and have them identify every sound, then blend it, and then read. They should not read towards the end of the sentence and determine which word will fit. They should not be looking for parts of the word they know from other words, because we know that in English, this incredibly difficult orthographic system and tricky orthographic system, different spelling patterns are used to represent different sounds. So you don't want to confuse them. Once they've practiced through decodable readers, they move on to level readers for richer reading. And here's what these will look like. So this is from the Biff, Chip, and Kipper stories. This is very, used in a lot of schools. One of the, it's one of the most well-loved strand of the Oxford Reading Tree series. And you can see that the focus shifts over here. So you are practicing blending some words. So pip, pot, 10. So this is the same level of so in the same reading level as the decodable reader that we looked at before. But see the progression in terms of blending skills and identifying tricky words. So there are a lot of content words over here now. And these content words need to be taught as tricky words because they have not yet been taught, such as, this word tree. They can identify but they don't know that the E over here represents long E sound. They've only learned the E pronunciation of the sound. So that they've only learned that phoneme yet. So this is taught as a tricky word. And you can see there's a lot of detailed pictures and a lot of intermingling of themes over here. So it's a much richer reading experience. So the sentences are still short, but there's a lot of detail that you can cover through pictures. And so the comprehension bit is really being emphasized over here. Remember the decoding part of reading and then the comprehension part of the reading. So level books are really essential for reading development. And Biff, Chip, and Kipper stories, like I said, fit into that part of richer reading. So we had a word with, we requested Roderick Hunt, who is the author of Biff, Chip, and Kipper stories, to share with us how he writes, within the very strict confines of graded readers. And he was kind enough to share his response. So let's watch what he has to say.
How do you write within the confines of graded readers? Are your early drafts edited to fit the reading levels, or do you write each story directly to that level? Well, yes, I do write within the confines of graded readers, and the early drafts are edited to ensure the vocabulary is at the appropriate level. However, the Oxford Reading Tree comprises two sets of stories with quite different approaches and therefore differing vocabulary progressions. The early stories were based on word frequency lists. These were research lists consisting of words children were most likely to encounter in their early reading experience, or of simple words that were most commonly used. I also devised my own sets of criteria. I used both repetition and syntax, as well as a number of cues such as context and visual clues. This is what's called a multi-cue approach. The second approach is quite different and is now almost universally used to teach reading in the United Kingdom. It's called Synthetic Phonics. It teaches children to read by teaching letters or groups of letters or graphemes and the sounds or phonemes that they represent. Children are taught to read words by blending the individual sounds together. For example, EA makes the sound E in such words as each or heap. Children are first taught small groups of sounds, then learn to blend the sounds to read words made up of those sounds. Then they're taught more sounds and learn to blend those too. The principle is that if a child knows the phoneme OA makes the sound O, as in goat or boat and float, then the word moat will be easy to read, even if it's the first time it's been seen. The books follow the order of teaching of sounds as set out by the UK government's six-phase teaching programme. This is called Letters and Sounds. Next question, is there anything else you hope students come away with
talking about the whole
after reading your
philosophy behind
stories
the books and
besides
how
reading
they're
skills?
developed?
Any
Remember,
general
there are three
feeling you hope
stages
to
that we need to
impart to young
follow.
readers?
Teach phonics, where
Thank
we
you for this lovely
explicitly teach
question.
the
I do see my
alphabetic
characters
code,
as role
letter
models for
sound
children
correspondences,
and young people.
practice,
So I want
through
my readers to be
decodable
encouraged and
words
influenced by
and
the
through
exploits and
decodable
adventures
readers.
of Biff,
The
Chip
Oxford
and
Reading
Kipper,
Tree has a
to be
range
active,
of decodable
self-reliant
readers
and
to choose
adventurous,
from. A lot of
and take a
them
few risks,
are available
and also
on
to be
Oxford
helpful,
OWL
resourceful, determined
as
and
free
persistent.
ebooks, so you can
I'd like them to have a high regard for
and then
others
there's the richer reading
and
strand that a lot of
unself-consciously
you
always
must
be
be familiar
prepared
with. The
to do the
Biff, Chip, and Kipper
kindly and
stories
decent thing.
are fit
And
within
here's the
this
next
part of
question.
the reading journey. So you're really moving from decoding to comprehension, richer reading experience. If you're looking at developing comprehension and teaching decodable words, there are some excellent teaching notes available on Oxford OWL for Biff, Chip, and Kipper stories, as are for decodable readers as well. So there's explicit guidance on how to use them in the classroom if you need more help with that. If you want to learn more about phonics, or if you're looking for an audio guide to help you learn the sounds and practice them, head on to oxfordowl.co.uk. And there are excellent videos and phonic guides for you to follow. There's a lot of guidance and expert advice on teaching phonics as well. And there are some really helpful videos on how to teach blending to read words. So simply go on to oxfordowl.co.uk, and there are lots and lots of free resources available online. The Oxford Reading Tree, of course, has components for all parts of the reading journey. So there's, the Floppies Phonics Sounds and Letters program for teaching phonics. We've got Decodable Readers for practicing phonics. And then we move on to richer reading. There are lots and lots of choices over there as well. So Oxford Reading Tree is such a lovely scheme because it has a systematic phonics teaching program, that complements everything in the reading journey. We have more decodable readers than any other reading program anywhere in the world. So choice is such an important element over there. Head on to Oxford Owl and see some of these decodable readers. So you'll be able to find them under the phonics section and start using them in the classroom. They're free and they're such an excellent resource. So the Oxford Reading Tree also offers a very unique bridge from phonics to richer reading, as we just saw. And there are more than 220 stories to choose from. And you know, some of the best loved characters, Pip, Pippa, and Floppy, of course. So many children have learned how to read using ORT. So it's tried and tested. And look, so the e-readers are free to use, so why not get started with them? All right, so just to recap, systematic synthetic phonics is evidence-based proven method for getting all students, all children reading. Excuse me. Children need to be explicitly taught how to blend or synthesize pure sounds into words for them to be able to accurately blend words and read. Level reading offers detailed, finely graded progression, taking learners from their very first step in reading all the way up to being skillful and independent readers, which is our ultimate aim, sorry, isn't it? And then decoding and comprehension are two important components. Remember, students need to be able to decode first and then they transition into comprehension. All right, so that's it for today's session. Thank you so much for attending. I am here to take your questions and I'll be looking forward to read your comments as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat window and I'll be answering them shortly. Thank you.